Is your baby feeding a lot overnight and not taking very much milk at all during the day? If that's the case, then your little one could be reverse cycling. And while it's extremely tiring for you because you're up lots overnight feeding, and then you can get frustrated during the day because they're not feeding very well, there are ways we can turn this around and change it for the better. Today I'm answering your sleep question. My baby is up at all hours of the night feeding and won't feed well during the day. How can I turn this around? Hi, I'm Jen. I'm Little One's Village Team Leader. I'm a qualified paediatric sleep consultant and mother to Carrick and to Heather. If you've tuned in here before, you'll know that Little Ones have helped over 200,000 families across the world, and we would love to help you with your baby's sleep challenges too. We don't only concentrate on baby sleep, we also focus on nutrition, and we have a wealth of information and guidance for you inside our app. For more information on our app, please visit our website. It's www.little1s.co, and I've stuck the link in the description below. I'll also add some other links to some blogs which will relate to what we're discussing today, which is reverse cycling. If it's your first time here, please do consider subscribing to our channel, and if you hit the little bell button at the top, you'll be notified whenever we release any new videos. Okay, let's start with the newborn age group. So thinking about babies that are under 3 months old. So why might they be up loads during the night to feed and not feed very well during the day? Well, a lot of our newborns, when they're just born and brand new in this world, have what's called day and night confusion. So they can be sleeping away their day and then they can be waking overnight. And what also happens when they're sleeping their day away is that they're not feeding. So if you find that your little one that's under 3 months old is feeding loads overnight, not feeding very well during the day, and is sleeping the day away, the best thing to do is to start waking them from their naps to encourage them to feed. So we want to try and reverse the balance and encourage them to get the majority of their calories and their nutrition in their 12-hour day, so that they're only up maybe 2 or 3 times during the night for a feed, which is much more manageable. Let's think about another age group. So there's loads of development that happens between 3 and 6 months. We know that, don't we? We've got the 4-month regression that crops up all the time, where sleep cycles change and mature. This can affect sometimes the feeding pattern of things, and I'll cover that a wee bit more in a minute. But also with this tremendous amount of development, we get complete distraction. So actually, Mum, I am not interested in taking that bottle. I don't want your boob. I want to see what's happening over there. I want to look at my brother or my sister or the TV. And they can just be totally distracted doing that. And then, of course, they start to wake up during the night because they've got to make up for the lack of the feeds during the day. So a top tip, if your little one is getting to that stage where they're just hugely distracted and don't want to feed, is to make it really boring. So you might want to feed them directly from their nap when they wake up. So stay in the dark room, keep the white noise on, and just pop them straight onto their feed. Make it as unstimulating as possible, and when they're still a little bit sleepy after their nap, they might latch on and take their feed a little bit better. Another tip might be to distract them, but with something that's close to where they're feeding. So a nice big chunky necklace that they can hold and play with safely while they're feeding. Sometimes that can help too. Outside of the distraction phase, we've also got, as I mentioned, the 4-month regression where sleep cycles mature. So obviously sometimes if your baby wakes overnight, you go, oh, I don't know, are they hungry, or are they just awake, or when should I feed? And you can question yourself. Totally natural to do that. But if your baby has woken at 10 o'clock at night and they're 4 months old, they've taken a nice full feed at 10 o'clock and they wake up at 12 o'clock, it's unlikely that 2 hours later they're going to be ready for a feed. So you can try to resettle them at a wake overnight that's less than 3 hours from their last full feed, rather than getting into this sort of pattern of feeding them every time they wake. And when this regression occurs and sleep cycles mature at 2 hours overnight, it can be quite easy to fall in to the pattern of feeding them at every wake. And then the knock-on effect of that is that during the day they're not interested in their feeds. So if that's what you can see is happening, So we're already sort of there with feeding them every 2 hours, and during the day they're like, no, not interested, but tonight I'm going to have to feed, because now we're in the pattern of genuine hunger overnight and really not being that hungry during the day. We need to address that a bit more delicately, because we can't starve, obviously, our little ones. So if that's the case, we might want to look at a pattern where we offer them a big full feed on their first week. Then on their next week, we start to reduce that feed down just a little bit every other night. Then a full feed on the following week, then a reduced feed on the next one. And that way, every other night, you're just reducing some of the feeds, slow and steady. And in turn, you should see the pattern of feeding in the day really improve. And let's think about a 6-month-old. So what happens around this age? We start solids, sometimes a little bit earlier, yes, if your little one's ready for solids. But usually at 6 months, we need to be starting to offer our little ones solids. It becomes important for their health and their nutrition. If they start taking solids too much too soon, we can start to impact daytime milk feeds. So they're filling up in solids, they're not interested in their milk. And remember that very much between 6 and 8 months and earlier, if you weaned before 6 months onto solids, milk is still the primary source of nutrition. So we always want to be offering milk before we offer solids. But if they're still really keen on solids and they're eating more than half a cup of solids at breakfast, lunch, dinner, it might be time to think about scaling back the amount of solids if you find they're refusing milk during the day and then waking up for more milk overnight. If your baby, and it's probably quite important to say this, if your little one is still taking full milk feeds during the day and eating solids or not, and they're waking overnight for 1 or 2 feeds, then that's not necessarily reverse cycling. That's probably normal hunger overnight. So a good indication of whether your child's milk feeds overnight are needed is the breakfast milk feed at 7 o'clock in the morning, or whenever your morning wake time is with little one. If they take a couple of feeds during the night and they're still really hungry for their 7 o'clock breakfast milk feed, they probably need those feeds overnight. And until they're well established in solids, 1 or 2 feeds overnight can be absolutely fine, absolutely natural, and there is no problem there at all. It's different, of course, if they refuse their 7 o'clock breakfast milk. If they're not interested in that, that's given us a little indication that they're having a bit too much milk overnight. And like we might have done if they were waking too early and we've reduced every other feed, what we can do, if they're only waking up for 1 or 2 feeds overnight, just start to reduce their second feed, slow and steady, a little bit less every 2 nights until they start to be interested again in their 7 o'clock breakfast milk feed, or their breakfast milk feed at whatever time of the day you start your day. That way you're addressing the balance back. So we've got the majority of the milk in the day again and just what they need overnight. So the breakfast milk feed's a good indication of whether they need a milk feed or as much milk overnight. But reverse cycling really is referring to them taking the majority of their milk overnight and really not much across the entirety of their day. If your little one is going to be starting a daycare environment where you go back to work or spending a bit of time with another carer, you might want to put a wee bit of groundwork in before you go. And that might mean that if you haven't introduced them to a bottle and they're going to need to take a bottle, maybe try introducing that before you actually do go back to work. Try doing it at the same time every day. Make the milk nice and warm. Breast milk itself is around the temperature of a spa, which is pretty hot. Obviously err on the side of caution and follow all safe recommendations in terms of health and hygiene. But yeah, it is pretty warm, and if you offer it at a time for a feed that they're really keen, maybe after their big long lunch nap, all these different things can help. There's lots of different bottles and teats that you can try, but try not to change things too much. So if you're offering a bottle, maybe at least stick with it for a good few days before you decide, actually this one's not for my little one. And they might also need a faster flow teat than you expect. If they've been used to breastfeeding, they've usually got a pretty strong suck and swallow. So a stage 1 teat might not be fast enough for them. So yeah, a few things to think about, but maybe trying introducing a feed or somebody else doing a feed before you actually go back to work and they enter that different environment is a really good idea. But again, just patience and time, and that should rectify itself. But certainly if they are slightly off their feeds when they're with somebody else, then it's natural to think that overnight they might wake again for an additional feed, but it should rectify itself as they go through a wee period of adjustment. I hope that has given you some guidance as to how you can help if your little one is reverse cycling. Remember though that often 1 or 2 feeds overnight, really normal. It's really only reverse cycling if they're taking the majority of their milk feeds overnight and really low during the day. But a good indication of whether they need as much milk overnight is their breakfast milk feed. If that's a poor feed, we can think about reducing the last feed before their morning breakfast milk feed. Our little ones will go through different ages and different stages, as we know. There's so much growing and so much development, and things can change. But if you find things sort of running away from you, there's more overnight wakes, there's more feeding than you think is normal, don't hesitate to reach out. At Little Ones, that's what we are here to help you with. So all things sleeping and all things feeding. And like I said back at the start, you can find more about our app at www.little-ones.co. So that link and the link to different blogs that I think will help you with reverse cycling in general are all in the description below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't, and remember to hit the bell for notifications. Tell us about your journey if you've had one with reverse cycling and how you've managed to rectify that, or if you're struggling right now, in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you the next time, and thanks so much for listening.